If you think homelessness only happens to addicts, the lazy, or people who just didn't try hard enough, then come to Florida. Meet a 70-year-old woman who works 7 nights a week and still has to sleep in her car next to her little dog. Not because she made bad choices, but because the system made every right choice she ever made completely meaningless. One afternoon, I pulled into a parking lot near a park in Miami. The sun was golden over the palm trees, the ocean shimmered like a postcard. But in that picture-perfect setting sat a thin, silver-haired woman beside an old car, a quiet little dog in her lap, her eyes exhausted. She used to be a librarian. She worked her whole life, saved every dollar she could, paid her taxes. Like millions of Americans, she believed in the retirement dream, a peaceful life by the sea after decades of hard work. Today, that dream means finding a quiet spot to sleep in her car before starting her second shift that night. And she's not alone. Florida, once known as retirement paradise, has become the place where that dream is dying every single day. The very people who helped build this country now fight for leftover bread, a safe corner to rest, and scraps of dignity just to survive. In today's video, we're not just talking about homelessness. We're talking about a generation. People who once believed, if I just work hard, everything will be okay. And now, they're slowly disappearing from America's map without a sound. There was a time when Florida was the dream destination for millions of Americans, a place of sunshine, palm trees, and well-earned rest. They called it a retirement paradise. But in 2025, people are calling it something else: the last stop, the edge of collapse, a beautiful ruin. And the people saying that aren't politicians. They're not journalists. They're the elderly, sitting on sidewalks, sleeping in cars, hiding under grocery store awnings, slowly fading out of the dream they gave everything to. Imagine working for 40 years, raising kids, paying off debt, saving every month, and when you finally reach retirement, you pick Florida, because where else would you go? But 10 years later, rent for a one-bedroom is over $2,300. Prescription costs have doubled. Your benefits get delayed or slashed, and your spouse is gone. Now it's just you, alone, with no safety net. That's not a rare story anymore. It's reality in Miami, Tampa, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale. Just take one wrong turn and you'll see tents on sidewalks, elderly men washing their faces at public faucets, and eyes that no longer burn with anger, just silence, fatigue, and quiet surrender.
Florida didn't collapse overnight. It cracked, piece by piece. From motel rooms rented by the week, to the lines for food banks at dawn, to the eyes of those who believed that hard work would be enough, now hiding from public view so they don't make anyone uncomfortable. What makes Florida's collapse especially painful is what it used to represent. It was a symbol, a promise that if you played by the rules, society would take care of you in the end. But now, the very place that once made that promise is the first to break it. So the real question is this just about Florida? Or is it about a deeper truth that America's safety net was never designed to catch everyone? Because the scariest thing isn't that Florida's collapsing. It's that it's collapsing quietly, beneath golden sunlight, right in the heart of the American dream. And what hurts even more is knowing that many of the people you see in these stories were once just like you and me. They had jobs. They had homes. They had plans. Until one accident, one medical bill, one sudden death, and everything derailed, not because they failed, but because there was no way back. In Florida today, people who spent 40 years building this country are standing in line for bread in public parks because the system they once trusted now sees them as a burden. There's a truth few dare to say out loud. Many of today's homeless used to be what society calls stable. They had jobs. They had homes. They paid taxes. They followed the rules. They believed in the system. And yet, here they are. I met a man in Jacksonville who drove a school bus for 28 years. Every day, rain or shine, he picked up kids and brought them safely to school. When his wife got cancer, he left work to care for her. The savings ran out. Insurance didn't cover the treatments. And just months after she passed, he was evicted. Couldn't pay the electric bill. Now he sleeps on a bench near an old church. Sometimes he wakes in the middle of the night, afraid someone will ask him to leave. He doesn't use drugs. He hasn't committed a crime. He doesn't bother anyone. He just doesn't have anywhere else to go.
And he's not alone. Tens of thousands in Florida have become invisible. They don't fit the image of homelessness we're used to seeing on TV. They're not messy, not dangerous, not lazy. They're just poor, just exhausted, just forgotten. So we have to ask, how does a society forget the very people who built it? Some say they should have planned better. But ask yourself, if one medical bill can erase a lifetime of work, is the problem really with the person or with a system so fragile that one bad week can destroy a lifetime? Not everyone has kids to help them. Not everyone has family to fall back on. And not everyone has the strength to start over at 65. But what's worse is that even the ones who are still working, still believe in hard work, still cling to dignity, still can't afford to live. And that's where we are now. They are people like Maria. She works 7 nights a week. No home, no bed, just an old car, a small dog, and restless sleep under streetlights. In the next part of the story, we'll step closer to people like her, those who haven't given up, but who've still been left behind. There was something I used to believe when I was younger, and maybe you did too, that if you worked hard, if you didn't give up, things would be okay. At the very least, you'd have a roof over your head. And then I met Maria. She's 63. She works night shifts as a security guard at a shopping center in Miami-Dade. 7 nights a week, no days off, no sick leave. Each shift lasts 9 hours. Her paycheck just barely covers gas, dog food, and car insurance. But a home? She doesn't have one. Her old Toyota Corolla is where she lives, sleeps, and even has her morning coffee in a paper cup, brushing her hair in the rearview mirror. She isn't lazy. She doesn't complain. And she's never asked for pity. As long as I have a job, I still have hope, she said. But her eyes, shadowed and heavy, told another story. A story of exhaustion, of being trapped between hard work and invisibility. We're living in a strange time, a time where people still work, still contribute, and still can't afford to live. In Florida, many seniors are still working part-time jobs, babysitting, cleaning, gardening, clerking at corner stores, not because they want to stay active, but because if they don't, they can't pay for gas, medicine, or food for the week. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of seniors over 65 still working in Florida has jumped nearly 60% in just a decade. Not because they're healthier, but because they don't have a choice. And the issue isn't just about age. It's about the math. Low wages can't keep up with the cost of staying alive. Rent has passed $2,300 a month. Meanwhile, many part-time jobs, security, cashiering, babysitting, barely pay $1,800 a month after taxes. So we have to ask, if you still work, still wake up early, still try, and still can't survive, is that your fault? Or is it the fault of a system where doing everything right still makes you homeless? And in the middle of all this, there's a painful truth. Most of us don't know Maria's story. Not because it isn't happening, but because society has learned how to look away, especially from people who no longer have much left to give, except their quiet presence on the edges of our cities. If you lived in Florida 10 years ago, you might remember you could rent a small, quiet apartment near the beach for just $700 to $900 a month. It wasn't fancy, but it was enough. It was home. Not anymore. In Miami or Fort Lauderdale, a basic one-bedroom apartment, nothing special, now goes for $2,000 to $2,600 a month. In Naples or Orlando, not much better. And that's just rent. That doesn't include electricity, water, internet, insurance, medication, or gas. With an average retirement income of just $1,600 to $1,800 a month in Florida, that means rent alone swallows up everything, and often more. And no, this isn't just the market. Florida has become a playground for real estate investors, tech millionaires, and wealthy buyers from Europe, China, and Canada. They pour money into luxury condos, beachfront villas, vacation homes, some of which sit empty for months. Meanwhile, the affordable apartments that once housed seniors, low-income workers, and single-parent families are disappearing from the map. Old buildings are torn down to make room for high-rises. Cheap motels are cleaned up for tourism. And the result? Seniors are pushed out. Young people are forced to leave their hometowns just to find hope in cheaper cities far away. A retired engineer once told me, "Finding a place to rent now is like playing the lottery. If I'm lucky, I'll find a shared room with 3 other people. If not, I go back to sleeping in my car." He used to design bridges, roads, hospitals. Now he tapes a sheet of plastic over his car window each night because the wind tore it off in a storm last week. That's not just irony. That's a quiet kind of humiliation for the people who helped build this city.
And the saddest part? It's not just the homeless who are suffering. Many people with homes, with jobs, are eating like they're already in a crisis. When rent takes up 80 to 90% of your income, choosing between food and medicine isn't budgeting, it's survival. And that's slowly eroding the dignity of an entire generation. In this reality, where seniors compete for quiet parking spots to sleep in their cars, another cruel twist has arrived. The government isn't solving the problem by providing shelter. They're solving it by making rest illegal. Starting in October this year in Florida, sleeping in parks, under bridges, or on sidewalks won't just be seen as a symptom of poverty, it will officially be considered a crime. Have you ever imagined that after a long, hard day of work, just lying down to rest could get you arrested? Simply because you no longer have a roof over your head? In Florida, starting this October, that will become a reality. In an effort to keep the streets clean and safe, Florida has passed a new law allowing cities to completely ban sleeping or camping in public spaces, including parks, sidewalks, and even beneath highway overpasses. Sounds reasonable at first, right? After all, who wouldn't want cleaner cities, fewer tents, more order? But here's the problem. There were no real solutions attached. No new shelters, no additional funding, no plan, no people, and no space to help move anyone to safety. The law allows the creation of authorized encampments, but only if existing shelters are full. The reality? Many shelters have been at capacity for years. Some cities have waiting lists of over 1,200 people, with only a few spots opening up each month. On Broward Boulevard, I met a middle-aged man pushing a cart full of his belongings. He used to be a welder. He had a home, a family. Now he moves constantly, because every time he lies down to rest, the police tell him to get up or get out. "We're not disappearing fast enough, so they made laws to do it for us," he said with a tired smile. The issue isn't just legal. It's the message behind the law. We don't want to see you. And when society begins to punish people simply for having nowhere to go, we have to ask ourselves, are we protecting communities or just cleaning our conscience by turning away?
But even worse are the places where the law doesn't even reach. Makeshift camps, gray zones in the middle of cities where SWAT won't step in and where law, order, and hope have all vanished. Imagine a place in America, in the middle of a major city, where people live, children, seniors, veterans, but there are no addresses, no streetlights, and no one dares to go in. It's not dystopian fiction. It's Florida 2025. Just a few blocks away from Miami's luxury resorts, there's a different world. No streetlights, no house numbers, no sirens, because even SWAT teams have been advised not to intervene. One such place is north of Miami-Dade, behind an old warehouse. Locals call it Invisible Town. Around 40 to 50 people live there. Some are mechanics, some are veterans. There's even a woman who worked as a postal clerk for 35 years. There's no electricity, no running water, no toilets, just tarps, scrap wood, and silent faces. A police officer once told a local newspaper, "We're trained to deal with criminals, but here, no one's breaking the law. We're facing a different kind of crisis, one where our tools don't work." In Invisible Town, there's no mayor, no rules, but also no protection from violence, disease, or despair. A few months ago, an elderly man developed a severe infection. He lay there for 3 days in 100-degree heat before anyone found him. When the rescue team finally arrived, they wore hazmat suits as if entering a disaster zone. This isn't a slum. It's the natural consequence of a system with no exits. When shelters are full, when assistance is cut, when sleeping outside is criminalized, these gray zones are what come next. And the saddest part? They're not even on the map. No zip code, no legal representation, no one to speak for them. The government doesn't recognize them. The media rarely covers them. And the people nearby pretend they aren't there. And these zones, they're growing, not just in Miami, but in Jacksonville, in Tampa, in Gainesville. Places where people used to belong are now where they disappear. But the injustice isn't just about where people get to live. It's about the stark, growing divide that becomes clear when you see a 72-year-old man eating cold noodles on a park bench just blocks away from a group sipping champagne on a $6 million yacht.
That's when the gap between the American dream and the American reality becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, a man in a parking lot eating stale bread alone. On the other, a rooftop party, a toast under the stars. Same night, same city. This isn't metaphor. This is Miami.
where the American dream and the American truth are just 3 blocks apart. If you've ever walked through Brickell or South Beach on a Saturday afternoon, you've seen the Florida most people imagine. Sunshine, rooftop restaurants, clinking glasses, conversations about real estate, crypto, and retiring in Europe. But take just one left turn, and suddenly, you'll see elderly people lying on park benches, eating canned soup, sharing a bottle of water, and using their backpacks as pillows. It's not 2 different cities. It's 2 different realities, coexisting in the same space, but never touching. Florida is one of the fastest growing states for real estate, luxury healthcare, and high-end tourism. In just the last 3 years, more than 4,000 beachfront mansions, each worth between $2 and $25 million, have been sold in South Florida alone. At the same time, soup kitchens in Miami-Dade have reported that the number of elderly lining up for food has doubled since 2020. Some seniors show up as early as 5 a.m., not because they're starving, but because they're afraid there won't be enough to go around. One aid worker once said, quote, "What breaks my heart isn't that they're asking for food. It's that they still try to smile and say thank you, even as their hands are shaking from hunger." In a society where a food delivery app can bring a $40 steak in 15 minutes, it's hard to accept that someone who once worked construction for this very city now has to cut a single vitamin into 3 parts just to get through 3 meals. This isn't ordinary poverty. This is a quiet rejection of human worth when someone is no longer seen as economically valuable. Florida, like many other places, is turning into a model of selective prosperity, where those with money live longer, healthier, more dignified lives, and those without are quietly pushed out of frame. Not by official order, but through distracted glances, invisible barriers, and seemingly harmless laws. The worst part? As the gap grows wider, people stop seeing it as injustice. They simply start calling it normal. And that's when the policies that once promised to protect the elderly begin to fall apart, quietly, silently. In America, we have hundreds of programs designed to support seniors. So why are there still grandfathers sleeping under bridges, waiting 9 months just to be approved for a $180 food voucher? When we talk about social safety nets, most people imagine a system that catches you when you fall. But for tens of thousands of seniors in Florida today, that net isn't catching anyone. It's become a maze. One 68-year-old woman shared her story. She applied for low-income housing back in 2021. In May of 2025, she finally received a call saying that she had moved to the second round of consideration. She waited nearly 4 years while sharing a rundown motel room with 3 other people, renting by the week. She didn't know how to apply online. She didn't understand the paperwork. She had no family to help. And every time she called the hotline, she was transferred 4 times, then disconnected. The problem isn't that we lack policies. The problem is they don't reach the people who need them most. The breakdown happens in the smallest details. No fixed address, ineligible for housing assistance. Limited tech skills, can't complete online forms. Federal and state programs don't align. You qualify for one, but get disqualified from another. Florida was once praised for attracting retirees, low taxes, advanced health care, warm weather. But as the elderly population grows rapidly, those policies are no longer enough to keep up with rising costs. According to a 2024 report, over 62% of seniors living alone in Florida no longer have enough income to cover basic needs, housing, medicine, food, or transportation. And yet, they're being left behind, not because the system hates them, but because the system no longer sees them. A social worker once told me, "I see dozens of seniors come in with every document in order, but they're too tired to wait. Some faint from exhaustion, others leave early because they need to get to their night shift." We can't call that welfare if it never reaches the people it's meant for, and we can't call it a civilized society if the law only serves the strong, the wealthy, and the well-connected. And when the law no longer touches real life, then trust begins to collapse. When people who spent their entire lives contributing feel invisible, they don't just lose housing, they lose their sense of belonging in the country they once believed in. And in the next part of this story, we'll ask a question that matters to us all. If those who built America no longer dare to dream of retirement, then where exactly is the American dream headed? Florida might be the first to fall, but it certainly won't be the last. Because if even the ideal model for retirement is breaking apart, then the rest of the country may just be walking the same path, only a few steps behind. Florida is a mirror, reflecting America's future. With nearly 21% of its population over the age of 65, it has the highest senior population in the country. But that number isn't just a statistic, it's a warning. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, by 2034, for the first time in history, there will be more Americans over 65 than under 18. In other words, we're entering an unprecedented era where the United States becomes a nation of elders, but without a strong enough system to care for them.
Florida is only the beginning. States like Arizona, Nevada, and Texas, long considered affordable retirement havens thanks to lower costs and warm weather, are now seeing skyrocketing housing prices, overwhelmed healthcare systems, and growing wait lists for public housing. So the question is, are we preparing for this? Or are we letting an entire generation slowly disappear in silence? Getting old isn't a choice, but how society treats the elderly, that's a choice. Generations before us built this country, raising families, paying taxes, working in factories, schools, hospitals, construction sites. And now many of them are eating their final meal of the day, dry bread and tap water. They sleep in cars with no air conditioning, in 100-degree heat. They wait for their turn to spend one night in an overcrowded shelter. Not because they failed, but because the system has no room left for them. If this can happen in Florida, a place once called retirement paradise, then where in America can we still believe growing old means being cared for? Because when the system no longer guarantees dignity for the elderly, what's at stake isn't just a generation, it's the moral core of our society. We once put a man on the moon. We built cities that touched the sky. But if today we can't protect a simple meal for a shivering senior on the sidewalk, then we must ask ourselves, what have we lost along the way? America was built on a simple promise, that if you work hard, contribute, and follow the rules, then in your old age, you'll be able to rest. That wasn't a privilege, it was a promise. Not written into law, but etched into the hearts of millions. And now that promise is being broken, not with violence or war, but with silence. Silence when an old man sleeps on a public bench. Silence when a woman buys instant noodles instead of heart medication. Silence when fences are built around homeless camps, not to help anyone, but to keep them out of sight. We may not have caused these injustices, but if we choose to look away, we become part of them. I'm not telling you all of this to make you feel hopeless. I'm telling you this to remind you we still have a choice. We can choose to look again, not just at the people society has forgotten, but at a system that has forgotten itself. We can choose to ask better questions. Is aging really what's frightening? Or is it a society that no longer has space for compassion? We can choose to act even in the smallest ways. A kind word, a warm meal for someone sleeping nearby, sharing the story with someone who needs to hear it, writing a letter to your city council about homeless seniors in your area. Because sometimes
The last thing a person needs isn't a luxury apartment. It's to be seen, to be counted as part of society, to be reminded that they still have dignity. Florida may no longer be the retirement paradise people once believed in, but if we start caring again, listening again, not turning away, then maybe, just maybe, this can be the place where we rebuild a society that remembers how to keep its promises. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this video. If this story touched you, if you believe more people need to hear it, please share it with a friend, or leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you still believe there's room for kindness in this world, join us in keeping that flame alive. We'll see you in the next video. And never forget, even the smallest act can be the greatest hope for someone else.